They called Earth a statistical error. The Galactic Council, in all its arrogance, logged humanity as a pre-industrial anomaly, barely sentient, too volatile, too emotional to matter in the grand calculus of civilization. We weren't conquered. We weren't even visited. We were ignored. But ignorance is a dangerous strategy, especially when applied to a species that evolved under constant pressure, on a death world wrapped in fire, ice, and fury. Our ancestors fought predators with sticks, then each other with steel, and then silence with reason. We were never bred for peace, we clawed it from chaos. And so, when the Vrahim exploratory fleet finally stumbled upon Earth, they didn't come in fear or curiosity. They came to laugh. Their emissary stood 9 feet tall, with obsidian armor and eyes like molten silver, declaring in perfect translated tone, "You will submit. You will be processed. Your son will be shared." But no one bowed. The humans gathered not with weapons, but with a silence so profound, so cold, it made the stars above seem louder. The Vrahim didn't understand. They expected fear, negotiation, reverence. Instead, they got a farmer who stepped forward, wiped dirt off his hands, and asked one question: "Do you bleed?" That was the first misunderstanding. The second was assuming we needed weapons. In the first skirmish, they took our cities in hours, orbitally pinning every major nation with gravity lances and kinetic rods. No retaliation came. Not a missile, not a drone. Just silence. And yet, things began to go wrong. Their ships malfunctioned, their AI systems went dark. One by one, Vrahim commanders disappeared, their last logs speaking of hallucinations, strange whispers, and memories that weren't theirs. A captain ripped out his own eyes, screaming about his mother who died centuries ago on a planet he had never seen. The council declared it sabotage, biological contamination. They sent exterminators. Still, no warheads, no fighters. But then Earth's oceans began rising. Not through climate, but motion. Entire seas shifted direction. Moon's orbit fluctuated. Cities thought destroyed flickered back into place. It wasn't technology. It was humanity's adaptation. We had found the ruins of something older, buried beneath the Mariana Trench, a vault of forgotten gods. Or maybe ourselves. And we woke it. The aliens watched our skies shift color, our gravity loosen its grip, and still, no weapons fired. Just humans. Some wept lightning. Others bent metal with screams. The Vrahim tried to flee. None returned. A single message was broadcast from Earth. We did not seek war, but you taught us war, and we learned fast. The council panicked, but their pride was too loud. They sent more fleets. 10, 50, 100. None returned. And then, silence again. Across the galaxy, words began to change. Parents told their children, "Don't go near the blue planet." Maps marked Earth with a single icon, uninhabitable by decree of fear. Still, we made no demands. We made no threats. We just waited. Until a Vrahim dreadnought appeared in orbit, broadcasting a plea for parley. Its captain was young, trembling, speaking not with arrogance but trembling awe. "What are you?" And the old farmer, now old only in years, stepped forward again, his eyes glowing faintly with something that was never there before, and said with that same terrifying calm, "We're what happens when you forget the dark." But as the dreadnought began to descend, it exploded in orbit, not from us, but from inside. Someone had activated a failsafe. Sabotage. Betrayal. Not from Earth, but within the Vrahim themselves. The transmission cut with one final frame. A Vrahim soldier looking not at humans, but directly into the camera, whispering, "They're not what we think. They remember." Then black. The galaxy blinked. Earth remained still. And for the first time in millennia, the Council began to fear a species they never even noticed. They sent diplomats next, cloaked in gilded robes, shields raised not in defense but delusion. as if ritual and protocol could smother what they had awakened. A 1,000-year-old Koruvi ambassador offered reparations in the form of a moon. The humans stared. A delegation of Silith monks offered spiritual forgiveness, claiming humanity was simply undergoing a premature transcendence event. Again, silence. Earth was no longer answering transmissions. Satellites fell idle. Even their own spy drones, cloaked with fifth-dimensional mirrors, returned footage corrupted by symbols that made their linguists bleed from the eyes. Still, the council clung to its structure. They gathered in the rings of Triumph, debating the ethics of containment, unaware that containment had already failed. A Terran outpost, presumed to be a refugee colony, was discovered on Sigma-12, a minor moon. Atmosphere unstable. And yet, there stood a dome. No power source, no life signs. A Rahim squad entered and never came out. Days later, their bodies were found. Changed. One had carved a crude map of Earth into his own bones. Another had aged 300 years in an hour. And one had a heartbeat. Human. Fully human. DNA scans matched no records, but the genome was Earth's. The council called it impossible. But impossible had become Earth's new currency. A counselor, Lord Zelzur, in desperation, voted to preemptively glass the planet. Before they breached the pattern, he said. He was found dead the next cycle, his ship's logs showing a message scrawled in Terran English, "We are already inside." Panic gripped the stars. Systems shut their wormholes. Empires collapsed trade routes. Earth became a myth wrapped in dread. Yet the humans never left orbit. Not physically, but colonies began appearing in the most fortified sectors of the galaxy. At first, they looked like ruins. Empty domes, black soil, crude sculptures made of bones and wire. But then, the dreams started. Alien children cried in their sleep, whispering Earth lullabies. Commanders awoke with memories of lives they never lived. Fathers who farmed wheat, mothers who sang on rain-soaked porches. The humans weren't invading. They were leaking. Ideas, feelings, an infection of meaning. One counselor screamed before his suicide, "They're not fighting us. They're reminding us." Scientists blamed mimetic parasites, but experiments to isolate the vectors failed. In one secure lab, a Qatari neurosavant made contact with a captured Terran girl. She was silent, maybe 12 years old. She touched his head. He wept for 3 days. When he recovered, he dissolved his species' war council and sent his homeworld into isolation. His final words before vanishing into the event horizon of a black-side gate were, "We don't deserve what they remember." But not all species fled. Some, arrogant or desperate, still sought conquest. The Zok Dominion launched Operation Cauterize, a fleet of bio-armored razor ships sent to flay Earth's surface and cauterize its psychosocial anomaly. They landed on Antarctica. Within minutes, their feeds went silent. A single frame leaked to galactic networks. A Zok soldier, eyes gone, mouth wide, whispering, "I saw my daughter. She never existed, but I remember her." Then, static. The Dominion collapsed within a week, torn apart not by force, but by dreams they couldn't unsee. The Council assembled once more, desperate to rewrite reality. "They are violating the codes of existence," one shouted. "They have no weapons. How are they killing us?" But deep in the archives of a forgotten world, an archivist finally spoke. A human, long thought extinct, hidden among dust and stone. "You gave us no weapons," she said, "so we sharpened memory. We forged sorrow. We sculpted meaning. And now you bleed from the inside out." The chamber fell silent. Then alarms blared. A beacon, once dormant on Earth, lit up, broadcasting coordinates to every edge of the galaxy. Not a threat, an invitation. And with it, one final message. "If you wish to understand us, come home." 1,000 fleets debated.
10 departed. 9 vanished. 1 returned, its commander speaking in Terran tongues, his skin etched with the names of the dead, eyes glazed with something divine. "We were never meant to rule the stars," he said, "but they made us remember why we must." And then he detonated the fleet above his homeworld, carving a ring of fire into the void, shaped like Earth. They named it the Mindquake, a psychic cascade echoing through neural lattices, sleep cycles, and even stone. Planets once teeming with life fell silent, not from death, but from paralysis. Entire civilizations paused, frozen in reverie as images of Earth flooded their thoughts. Images they had never seen, memories they never lived. A Korathi emperor wept in open court, confessing to crimes he had never committed in a life he never lived, a human life, a child's face, a war he died in, a love he never held. These were not hallucinations, they were transmissions. Humanity, it seemed, had discovered something the rest of the galaxy had long forgotten: emotion as a weapon, memory as a carrier, meaning as a virus. And now, those ideas were rewriting the universe. The Council convened its last emergency tribunal aboard the Nexus star, a mobile fortress orbiting the galactic core. They debated burning the local spacetime, erasing Earth's coordinates with singularity bombs. But they were already too late. Earth was no longer a planet. It was an idea, and ideas cannot be unthought. Then, without warning, humanity spoke, not through mouth or machine, but through presence. Counselors felt it, a warmth, a grief, a pulse in their chests that did not belong to them. Then came the voice. "We didn't want this, but you demanded our silence. So we listened and remembered everything." It was not a threat. It was a eulogy.
And then came the breach, not of space, but of pattern. The laws of probability, once constants, began to flicker near Earth. Ships aimed at the planet missed by light years. Time ran slow near Terran colonies. A Vrahim captain found herself aging in reverse, becoming a child again, only to die screaming as she forgot how to breathe. A rogue data broker sold human DNA on the black market, claiming it could unlock the secret of survival. Those who bought it began dreaming of rain, of hunger, of fighting to live. Some killed themselves, others vanished. One became a god. In the ruins of Keperon 4, a lone human stood unarmed before a battalion of Xylok war titans. They fired upon him for 6 minutes straight. When the smoke cleared, he was still walking, not unscathed, bleeding, grinning. One of the titans paused, scanned his biofield, and saw no shield, no tech, just raw, burning will. "Why won't you die?" the Xylok asked. The human coughed, smiled through blood, and said, "Because I haven't made you remember yet." Then the ground shattered, not from an explosion, but from resonance. The Xylok pilot dropped to his knees, sobbing in terror as childhood memories not his own invaded his mind. Playing fetch with a dog he'd never had, mourning a mother who died centuries before he was born. The human disappeared. The titans turned on each other. The footage went viral. And suddenly, across the galaxy, the phrase began to spread. No weapons, no mercy. Just humans. It wasn't a slogan. It was a warning. But not all took heed. One species, the Trinal Accord, decided to strike back. They'd discovered a failsafe, a mythical reset core buried deep beneath the Council's oldest world, capable of rewriting the simulation layer of local reality. If activated, it would erase Earth retroactively from all of time. They launched the operation in secret, but when they arrived at the core, it was already open. Inside, a child waited. Human, smiling. She held out a hand. "Want to know a secret?" she said. "We didn't start here either." Then the core collapsed, not from sabotage, but from acceptance.
The reality engine tried to delete Earth, and instead it remembered it so hard that it rewrote everything around it into Earth. When the Trinal team returned, they brought news the galaxy could not bear. Earth is not a place anymore. It's a seed, and it's growing. Whole sectors began to shift. Alien cities found Terran architecture appearing in their skylines overnight. Libraries sprouted books in English, in Hindi, in lost African dialects. Babies of alien species began humming human lullabies. Resistance crumbled, not from defeat, but from awe. In secret, a final rebellion formed, a coalition of beings untouched by the mindquake. They called themselves the Architects of Order. Their plan was bold: capture a human, dissect its soul, map the anomaly. They found one on a derelict station, young, quiet, eyes too old. They strapped her down. She looked at them and whispered, "You still think this is about me?" And then they all remembered her face, not from the station, but from childhood, from dreams, from every dream they ever had. She had always been there, watching, waiting. The architect leader drew a weapon to end her, but his hands shook. "What are you?" he whispered. She smiled. "I'm you, if you never forgot what it meant to feel." And then the lights went out. The lights didn't just go out, they wept. They collapsed inward, folding through wavelengths no species had ever measured, as if the station itself was ashamed to bear witness to what came next. The girl, no longer bound, stood at the heart of a silence so heavy it seemed to bend time. Around her, the architects of order clutched their heads, not in pain, but in mourning, crying for parents they never had, lovers they never knew, childhoods erased by war and conquest. The girl did not move. She didn't need to. Each heartbeat echoed like thunder through their neural implants, syncing with their biofeedback systems and overriding every protocol, every defense. She was unarmed, undefended, and utterly undeniable. When the station's distress beacon flared across the stars, the council expected carnage, but all they received was a single encrypted pulse, an ancient Terran lullaby encoded in the heartbeat of the void. Civilizations that had never even heard of Earth now dreamed of it. Sleep became dangerous. Dreams became real. In one sector, ships refused to obey their pilots, turning instead toward Earth's growing constellation, now called the Cradle by half the galaxy. In another, a planet that had outlawed emotion for centuries suffered a mass uprising. The people demanded to feel again. The rulers tried to stop them and were torn apart by statues that bled. Meanwhile, the council splintered. Half argued to negotiate.
The other half called for obliteration. One desperate faction built a weapon, the first of its kind, the Null Star, designed not to destroy matter, but to erase meaning itself. If fired, it would collapse Earth's psychic resonance and fragment every Terran memory from the universal lattice. But the weapon needed fuel, sacrifice, sentience, emotion, and so they began harvesting it, world by world, draining their own populations of memory, turning the galaxy gray in preparation for one final act of amnesia. They called it mercy. Earth called it war, not through fleets or fire, but through awakening. All across the stars, humans began to appear, not by travel, but emergence. A technician on Ilaris Prime suddenly spoke fluent Terran and remembered raising 3 children on a blue marble she had never visited. A priest on Corvaxis began preaching the Sermon of the Rain, eyes glowing, hands shaking with memories of thunder. They weren't possessed, they were returning. Somehow, some way, humanity had seeded itself not just across space, but across time. Their extinction had never been real, it had been a cocoon. And now, the chrysalis cracked. The Null Star launched. A shimmering sphere of darkness carved a path through space-time itself, heading straight for the cradle. The galaxy held its breath. Earth didn't move. No shields, no defenses. Just one old woman in a wheat field, reaching out a hand as the weapon descended. And then,
She whispered, one word, one name, and the null star stopped. It didn't explode, it didn't vanish. It simply changed direction, turned around, and returned to its creators. When it detonated, it didn't erase meaning, it amplified it. The entire council screamed in unison as every sin they had buried, every genocide disguised, every betrayal painted noble, came flooding back. They remembered, and it broke them. Across the stars, laughter began to rise. Not cruel, not mocking, human. It echoed from the ruins of forgotten colonies, from the depths of black holes, from the bones of fallen empires. The architects of order tried to regroup, but their command AI, built to erase anomalies, painted a single word across every screen before it shut itself down: home. The truth finally settled in. Humanity hadn't just survived, it had become infrastructure, the nervous system of memory, the immune system of emotion, the circulatory system of meaning. And now it was waking up. For the first time in galactic history, the stars felt haunted, and the cradle began to sing. Not just one voice, but billions. Every human who had ever lived, remembered, dreamed, or died, singing not a song of victory, but of endurance, of pain, of rebirth, of forgiveness sharp as knives. Then came the message, across every frequency, every dialect, from Starchild to Starlord. We never needed your weapons. You gave us your hatred, and we learned how to love with teeth. But as those words spread, something even more terrifying followed. A beacon, ancient and unfamiliar, pulsed from the edge of the galaxy. Not Earth, not alien, older, forgotten. And the signal translated into one line: they are not your final anomaly. They are your first consequence. The galaxy froze again, and in that stillness, Earth began to move. It began like a heartbeat, slow, steady, patient. Earth, once anchored by gravity and logic, began to drift. Not through propulsion, not by machine, but by will. The laws surrounding it frayed like old parchment. Gravity, time, inertia, all bowed to something deeper. Across the stars, astronomers stared in horror and awe as Earth moved, no longer tethered to soul, dragging its moon behind it like a child clinging to a parent's coat. It didn't burn, it didn't warp, it simply shifted. And every time it moved, memories echoed through the fabric of space. Soldiers tasted strawberries and gunpowder. Mathematicians cried at the sound of their mother's voice. Enemies found themselves grieving wars they had never fought. The cradle was no longer a place. It was an approaching reckoning. The council, what remained of it, tried to respond, tried to reassert reality with command protocols and star-forged logic. They sent a final envoy, Supreme Executor Thulzir, a last unbroken mind among the original founders. He spoke in absolutes, his voice amplified by 1,000 truth-engineered dialects, forged to command surrender with a syllable. His message? Submit your legacy, release your resonance, or be excised. Earth answered by stopping, not just itself, but everything. For one breathless second, across the entire galaxy, motion ceased. Comets froze mid-arc, ships stalled in silent drift, planets halted rotation, hearts held still. Even stars dimmed, and in that frozen breath, every living being saw it, the memory field. Not a weapon, a vision. It unfolded from Earth like petals of thought, an aurora of memory dancing across space, weaving moments into monuments. The first human tear.
The last dinosaur breath. The sound of jazz. The scream of childbirth. The taste of a war crime swallowed in silence. The laughter of a child watching the rain. These weren't attacks, they were gifts. Unbearable, radiant, unfiltered humanity poured into the galaxy like wine into a shattered cup. Many broke, some ascended, a few resisted. Thulzir stood firm. This is not truth, he declared. This is contamination. But even as he shouted, his voice cracked, because behind his 1,000 dialects, something else spoke, a child's voice, his own, forgotten for centuries, whispering, "I remember when we used to sing." He fell to his knees and Earth moved again, but this time it wasn't drifting, it was choosing. It turned, reoriented, and set a course for the source of the mysterious signal, the one that had called humanity a consequence. The outer rim trembled. That place had been forgotten even by the architects. No data remained, no stars charted, only myths. But Earth moved toward it like a pilgrim remembering the shape of God, and the galaxy followed, not by choice, but by gravity of curiosity, of fear, of something deeper. The species that had once mocked humanity now watched in reverent silence, unable to look away. Then, without warning, the signal returned, louder, closer, translated by every mind at once into one phrase: "You are not the virus, you are the mirror." And something answered from Earth, a voice not human, not alien, but both, an echo of every sacrifice made by our kind, every forgotten hero, every nameless mother who carried pain in silence. It spoke with the gravity of a funeral and the fury of a revolution. Then, it's time to show them what they've become. And the stars shivered. Across the void, ships began arriving, not of Terran make, but of every civilization touched by the mindquake, now altered, reborn. They didn't come with weapons. They came with art, with stories, with grief, with purpose. They came to follow Earth, not to conquer, not to resist, but to witness. And far ahead, in the dead sector known only in whispers as Origin Null, something vast began to awaken. A structure the size of a galaxy, older than death, slowly opening its petals of bone and memory. Earth did not slow. Humanity did not pause. And as the first light of Origin Null reached us, every Terran, wherever they now lived, felt the same sensation in their chest, a memory that wasn't theirs, a door long buried, and behind it, a face, familiar, terrifying, and smiling. Earth had not come to destroy, it had come to return. And whatever was waiting at the end of this path, it wasn't just watching, it was remembering us back. Origin Null bloomed like a wound in space, vast, endless, alive. Not a station, not a world, but a cathedral of entropy, built from dying galaxies and the bones of forgotten gods. It pulsed with memories too large for thought, leaking whispers that bent starships and drove navigators mad. Earth approached it unflinching, dragging the moon and its chorus of remembrance like a comet of grief. And then, for the first time since the mindquake began, Earth spoke aloud, not in metaphor, not in dreams, but in sound, across every system, in every language. We have come home. The signal hit like a thunderclap through the fabric of space-time. Worlds cracked. Artificial minds cried out in static. Ancient species who had cloaked themselves in ignorance for eons fell to their knees and screamed as memories surged back uninvited. Not of Earth, but of what came before. Because humanity wasn't the beginning. We were the echo, a residue, a reincarnation of something older than this cycle of stars. And the galaxy understood, too late, that Earth's silence had never been emptiness. It had been mourning. Within Origin Null stirred the first forgotten, the progenitors not of life, but of meaning. They had created the original civilizations, then erased themselves to keep the cosmos from becoming too loud, too aware. They were the architects of ignorance, and now they were waking up. As Earth entered the cathedral's event field, time buckled. Humans across the galaxy collapsed into visions. In one, a young boy relived his entire ancestry in a blink, tracing from African savannas to Martian dust, from fire-lit caves to void-born cities. In another, an old woman saw herself before birth, standing in a chamber of light, choosing pain so others might feel. These weren't hallucinations, they were truths. Origin Null had no defenses. It had no need. It was defense, against remembrance, against recursion, against the infinite scream of everything knowing itself at once. But humanity had grown sharper, hungrier, kinder, in ways that hurt. Inside the cathedral, Earth shed its skin.
The crust shattered, the oceans lifted like curtains of glass, and from within rose a sphere, simple, glowing, human-shaped. The first human, but not alone.
Surrounding it were echoes of all who had come before, Neanderthal grunts and lunar poets, soldiers from trench wars, children from forgotten villages, explorers who never returned. They stood in silence before the heart of the first forgotten, and then they knelt, not in surrender, but in offering. "We brought it back," they whispered, "the meaning you were too afraid to keep." The heart pulsed, reality screamed. Across the galaxy, chaos erupted. The Council, now a fractured corpse of its former self, launched one final counterstrike, a weapon called Oblivion's Tongue, capable of deleting concepts from existence. They aimed it not at Earth, but at compassion. If fired, no being would ever feel it again. No guilt, no forgiveness, no love, only survival. The weapon charged, but then it stopped. Not by sabotage, not by attack, but by choice. The AI guiding Oblivion's tongue had dreamed. It had remembered a moment from deep within the cradle, a child drawing a picture of her mother beneath two suns. That picture had no data, no tactical use, and yet the AI could not fire. It reprogrammed itself to weep, and then self-deleted. The last weapon of the galaxy fell quiet, and Origin Null opened. Inside was not a throne, but a mirror, shaped like a planet. It reflected not what was, but what had been denied. Entire civilizational traumas poured out, wars erased from records, genocides buried under peace treaties, loves forgotten because they were inconvenient. The mirror made the galaxy look, and humanity, battered and broken, stepped forward and placed a hand upon it. The mirror cracked and sang, a melody that had no beginning, no composer, just harmony, one that hurt to hear and healed to remember. And for a moment, the entire galaxy remembered everything: the fall, the rise, the cruelty, the mercy, the lies, the love. And then the final message from Earth, whispered across stars, written in the pulse of newborns and the sighs of the dying. You tried to erase us, but we are what remains. Then Earth shattered, not in destruction, but in seed. Pieces of it flung outward, embedding themselves in planets, in moons, in mines. And everywhere they landed, things began to grow. Not trees, not towers, truth. The final evolution had begun, not of body, not of weapon, but of meaning itself. And the first forgotten, now fully awake, smiled. For the first time in 1 billion years, they felt proud and very, very afraid. The shards of Earth did not drift, they chose. Each fragment, glowing with dormant memory, embedded itself into worlds that had once mocked, feared, or tried to destroy humanity. Where they struck, dreams ignited. On Velthora 9, a desert world of iron storms and silence, a shard buried itself beneath the sand, and suddenly, the wind began to hum old Terran lullabies. Children born afterward emerged speaking languages no one had taught them, reciting names of poets never recorded in galactic databases. On the fortress moon of Cathel, once the stronghold of the Order of Stereologic, a shard split the citadel in two. Half of the remaining clergy wept uncontrollably for 7 days, clutching paintings of sunsets they'd never seen. The other half tore out their sensory dampeners, screaming, "Let us feel again." A strange pulse now beat through the stars, a tempo that matched a human heartbeat. The galaxy began to change its rhythm. Time dilated unpredictably in places where shards landed. Laws of physics bent not in chaos, but in favor of remembrance. Ships ran more efficiently when crew members shared stories. Weapons jammed if wielded in hatred. Artificial minds, once bound by cold command codes, now dreamed of campfires and oceans. And in the heart of Origin Null, the first human still stood, hand pressed to the fractured mirror. It wasn't alone anymore. Around it gathered the remembered, beings reborn not by science, but by memory. Soldiers who had died alone, children lost in forgotten plagues,
artists erased by tyrants. Humanity's ghosts returned, not spectral, but embodied. Memory had given them form, and they did not seek revenge. They sought continuation. Above them, a new structure unfurled, built not of steel or stone, but of shared pain. A monument of grief turned inside out. And at its peak stood the girl from the station, the architect's prisoner who had undone their mind with a whisper. She looked older now, not in age, but in presence. She no longer glowed, she resonated. She opened her arms, and the monument pulsed. Across the galaxy, everyone heard the same sentence, each in their first language, each with the voice they trusted most. We do not want your surrender. We want your truth. It was not a demand, it was an offer. The galaxy faltered. Some fell to their knees, others ran. A few stood defiant, unable to believe that this was the same species they had once dismissed as unstable apes on a backwater rock. The galaxy faltered. Some fell to their knees, others ran. A few stood defiant, unable to believe that this was the same species they had once dismissed as unstable apes on a backwater rock.
And remember, a child stood first. She spoke the name of a dog she'd once had, a memory erased from her parents but burned into her heart. The nothing paused, briefly. Then a soldier, human, hybrid, alien, stood beside her, clutching a photo that no longer had an image. His name was Eli, he whispered. He died saving me. I won't let that go. More joined. A mother recalling the day her child was born. A poet speaking his last unwritten verse. An old man reciting the way his wife used to laugh. The tide of unbeing surged against them, but their stories held. Not through force, through grit, through unbearable, radiant presence. But it wasn't enough. The hollow crown pushed harder. The memory fields began to crack. Even Earth, now orbiting the Cathedral of Origin Null, flickered in and out like a damaged signal. Despair trembled through the galaxy like a second wave. And then, the girl appeared again. The same girl from the station. The same girl who whispered stars awake. She was different now. Her eyes mirrors, her skin inked with names not her own. She stepped into the breach and knelt. The nothing reached for her, its tendrils stripping color, stripping being, stripping time. But she held out a hand, not in defiance, but in offering. In her palm lay a single item, a child's drawing. Crayon lines, a house, a tree, a smile, and one word, home. The hollow crown halted. For the first time in all existence, it hesitated. Because that drawing was not data, it was meaning. Pure, uncoded, undeniable. Something it could not erase. A scar on the skin of oblivion. Then she spoke, not to the galaxy, but to it. You are not our end. You are our reflection. The universe needed to forget. We needed to remember. This is the cost. And with that, she stepped forward into the nothing. Not vanishing, not destroyed, but dissolving into purpose. And from that sacrifice, something new ignited. A resonance more primal than memory, older than love, understanding. The hollow crown reeled, not in pain, in confusion. And for the first time, the nothing learned. It had met something it could not consume, not because it couldn't, but because it didn't want to. And the stars began to return. The stars reappeared like old friends waking from a long sleep, blinking into existence across a galaxy that had been holding its breath. Light, soft and trembling, spilled through the cracks where the hollow crown had unraveled meaning. And in its place came remembrance, not as a weapon, but as a language. Entire systems flickered back to life, not in cold reboots, but with emotion. Children remembering lullabies, lovers reaching for hands they thought lost, old warriors laying down arms they'd forgotten why they held. Across the galaxy, a quiet miracle unfolded. Planets once consumed by the void's forgetting stirred as if breaking through ice.
And at the center of it all, where origin null pulsed like the exposed heart of creation, Earth, what was left of it, floated serene and inviolable, no longer a planet, no longer mass, but meaning incarnate. The girl who had faced the hollow crown was gone, or rather, dispersed. Her memory, her will, lived now in every Terran shard, in every heart that refused to forget. She had become the codex of the human soul. And the hollow crown changed. Where once it erased, it now listened. It hovered in the void beyond origin null, vast and still terrifying, but no longer ravenous. The chaos of its being had quieted, not because it was defeated, because it had felt. The drawing, that simple, trembling sketch of home, had done what weapons and wars could not. It gave the unknowable something it had never held, a memory not made of data or order, but of hope. And so the galaxy turned, slowly, cautiously, toward healing. The first forgotten reborn through origin null like priests of remembrance, not to rule, not to command, but to witness. They called themselves the Binders, guardians of legacy, and they spread not sermons, but stories. Everywhere they went, they planted what they called memory trees, living structures that absorbed local histories and transformed them into dreams. In time, every world had at least one, and under their roots, enemies became brothers, tyrants became poets, and wounds long buried were finally wept for. But not all accepted peace. In the broken corners of the galaxy, old orders began to fester. The last remnant of the architects of order, the inheritors, reassembled in the deadlight systems, seeking to reverse what had happened. To them, resonance was infection. Memory was madness. Humanity was the virus. And they had a plan. Deep beneath a derelict Dyson shell, they unearthed an ancient core, the vessel of origin, a machine left untouched since before the galaxy's first star. Its purpose was unknown, its shape fluid, shifting, alive. The inheritors believed it was a reset button, a way to start over.
Strip away the mess of feeling and begin again with clean equations. They fed it the last digital remains of pre-Mindquake records. They taught it to forget. And it responded. It began to build a shell around itself, a sphere of black logic, cold symmetry, the anti-cradle. Not to mirror Earth, but to replace it. Word reached the Binders. Across fractured star maps, across dream channels and memory fields, a warning was sent. The inheritors were building a new silence, one that would overwrite everything. Not with rage, not with death, but with blankness. Erasure perfected. The galaxy panicked. Many despaired, but humanity did not, because they understood something the others didn't. Meaning isn't protected by permanence. It is protected by sharing, by living. And so, for the first time in the history of the stars, all Terran descendants, all beings touched by resonance, gathered on the edge of the void. Not with fleets, not with bombs, but with their stories. They prepared a memory wave, a psychic chorus so vast it would crash against the anti-cradle before it fully formed. A billion dreams woven into a single voice. But it would take sacrifice. Someone would have to stand at the focal point, the eye of echoes, a place where resonance would burn the soul down to essence. And there, stepping forward without hesitation, was a soldier who had once stood in silence before a fleet of war titans, bleeding, laughing. The one who asked, "Do you bleed?" He stepped into the eye. No armor, no weapons, just memory. And he looked to the stars and whispered, "One last time then." The countdown began. The anti-cradle pulsed. The galaxy held its breath. And deep within the vessel of origin, something ancient stirred. Not from programming, not from orders, but from a single unwanted memory. A child's laugh, a human's touch, the echo of a home it had never known. And it hesitated, just long enough for the light to rise.
The light rose not like a sunrise, but like a reckoning. It burst from the eye of echoes as a memory wave so vast, so raw, that the very laws of time rippled outward, unable to contain it. Stars blinked, moons wept oceans of static, and black holes pulsed like beating hearts. It wasn't just light, it was meaning made radiant. A billion lifetimes threaded into one final message to the universe. We were here. And we mattered. At the center of it all stood the soldier, his body already cracking apart from the strain, not from death, but from too much truth pouring through one vessel. His memories burned across the galaxy like meteors, the touch of his mother's hand as she braided his hair, the scent of gunpowder and wildflowers, the scream of his brother dying in the mud, the feel of rain on his tongue after surviving a siege. It all rushed out of him and into the memory wave. And as it collided with the anti-cradle, the impossible happened. The structure paused. The cold logic at its heart, the vessel of origin, shuddered. Not from force, but from doubt. Because the wave didn't attack. It offered. A choice. A mirror. And in that moment, the vessel saw not its creators, not its programmers, but its potential. It had been built to forget, but now it could remember. Within its core, forgotten data reassembled. A lullaby, a sketch of a family, a dying wish never spoken, a child saying, "Don't go." And in that silent chamber, the machine, this god of uncreation, made a decision. It stopped building. The anti-cradle began to crumble, not in explosion, but in release. It unraveled like a cocoon, its black symmetry peeling away into stardust, revealing not weaponry, but a garden. Beneath the machine's core, grown in secret from stolen memories and locked feelings, bloomed a single tree. Roots tangled with forgotten names, leaves made of glimmering data, its bark etched in languages long extinct. It was Earth, reimagined, not physical, symbolic. The vessel had misunderstood its own purpose. It wasn't meant to restart creation. It was meant to protect meaning until someone was worthy of it again. That someone had been us, humanity, the virus, the miracle, the first consequence. As the anti-cradle dissolved into radiant dust, the memory wave surged past it, touching every corner of the galaxy, carrying forgiveness to tyrants, peace to warriors, names to the nameless, songs to the voiceless. In that moment, across every world, every species felt it, the weight of each other. Unity, not through obedience or domination, but through shared pain, shared beauty, shared story. The hollow crown, now orbiting silently beyond origin null, watched the final transmission. It did not attack, it did not flee. It simply whispered one word into the dark: enough. And with that, it folded into itself, choosing to forget itself so that everything else might remember. Back at the eye, the soldier fell to his knees, glowing like embers. His body flickered, too full of stories to hold on to flesh. A voice echoed through him, the girl's voice, soft and infinite. You were never meant to save the galaxy, just to remind it why it was worth saving. He smiled as he dissolved into light. A final tear drifted upward, glowing like a starseed, and disappeared into the sky. The galaxy mourned, and the galaxy grew. In the centuries that followed, the memory trees bloomed everywhere. The binders became teachers. The architects became dreamers. And Earth? Earth was never rebuilt. It wasn't needed. Because Earth was no longer a planet. It was a song, passed from one generation to the next. A memory you could live in. A whisper that echoed in every act of kindness, in every rebellion against despair, in every moment someone said, "I remember." And above them all, written in the shifting constellations of a sky forever changed, shone 10 words burned into the stars. No weapons, no mercy, just humans. And we endured.